Hello there, my name is Brett Sheldon from the Business Support Organisation. This is just a very quick introduction video for the main presentation, which was the recording from last night's evening with presentation from Nigel Smith. So for those who've not been to or actually attended one of these videos before, or actually been in the actual audience, whether we do face-to-face or whether we do it online, an evening with is a very simple format where one of our members will talk about a particular topic. Nigel's talking about disc profiling and how it's of use in the workplace, and to be fair, it's actually quite an interesting one. There are some supporting materials if you would actually want to have access to those from Nigel. I mean, if you want those, please give us a shout. We'll put you in contact and get them sent out to you. Those are, like I say, some mini disc profiles, but it's well worth a watch. It's about an hour long, so have fun. Oh, and just a quick disclaimer on here. Yeah, obviously there's usual beer sale disclaimer with any comments, but this video has been recorded at the end of February. Anybody in the UK will know we're now 2 months into this lockdown, so I'm in desperate need of a haircut, as you can probably tell. Things are sticking up. So enjoy, have fun, and please don't forget to follow us. Don't forget to like the video and to subscribe to the channel. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Okay, so ladies and gents, welcome to our evening with tonight. Tonight we have the company of Nigel Smith. For those who've seen Nigel speak before, he is actually a very, very, very good speaker. And since we haven't got Adam on here today, he actually promised today this will be something that will knock Adam off his perch for the best presentation of the year. So there's no pressure on anybody else, especially if we got Don. If you can mark, I mean, I know that you know Nigel, so if you can obviously be the overly critical one at the end, that'd be fantastic. But hopefully it'll be a really good presentation. Now I've bigged him up massively, and there's no pressure on him. So it's so before we start tonight's meeting, has anybody not been to one of our evening withs yet? I'm conscious, Jason, you're a new member. Okay, so those who've not been to just an evening with, basically it's a straight education event. So we're going to get people to introduce yourselves in a second. Just a simple 8-second introduction. Tonight is more about education, discussing topics. When we've run these over the last since we started, the whole idea is about getting topics out there to, like I say, help members of one form or another. But I'm conscious, obviously, it's also a networking event. So if there's people on here you want to follow up with, you have all got the delegates list. Please don't forget to do that. So I'm going to do is going to go through people at random. I'm just going to go through my screen just to introduce yourselves. To start off with, just simply just your name, company name, what you do. Should be able to do it in around about 8 seconds, and then we'll hand over properly to Nigel, if we may. So Karen, you was on first. If you could quickly introduce yourself.
I'm Karen Bourne, NLP coach and trainer, and I help you achieve your full potential.
Fantastic. Nigel, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
I'm going to save mine, Brett, till my introduction to the session, if that's okay.
In that case, if you can do less than 8 seconds to do that, that'll be great. Mandeep, are you there, Mandeep? Yep.
Sorry about that. I just got to hit the unmute button. So I'm a family-run business in property management, in sales and lettings, based in Tipton, Great Bridge, West Midlands. So we're a family-run, a husband and wife, to help each other, help everyone out to become a landlord or sell or rent their properties.
Brilliant. Mr. Heywood?
Hi, I'm Andrew Heywood, and I run a small consultancy that specialises in supporting not-for-profits to raise funds and be more effective.
Brilliant. Joe?
Joe Watkins, Q6 IT, provide fully managed IT services to businesses. We want organisations to love their IT as much as we do.
Brilliant. Just to let you know, Joe, if you can have a shout at Gary, because your logo's backwards.
I've just flipped it backwards the other way, so I'll flip it again.
Don't worry, there's something on there. I just noticed something. I thought, hang on a second, she now works for Tio. And if we go to Val.
Val Jones, Revital U. We provide health and wellbeing supplements.
Brilliant. Vicky?
Hi, it's Vicky from 73 Design, graphic design, brand identity, and also creative coaching.
Brilliant. Charlotte?
Charlotte Thorpe, Kinetic Communications, PR and communications agency, helping businesses to stand out and grow.
Pierre?
Pierre Watson, aka Pierre the Bear, copywriting.
Brilliant. Lisa?
Lisa Billingham. I'm an author and an intuitive reader.
Brilliant. We have Jason.
Jason, HippoServe, hassle-free web hosting, just getting rid of all that technical nonsense and just getting straight to it to help small businesses get online.
Brilliant. We have Daryl.
Daryl Smith, Beacon Business Solutions, website development, mobile app development, and general software development.
Don?
Michael Don Smith, the signature speech coach. And I'd just like to say, hi, Pierre. It's been a long time, man.
It has indeed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we go to Jack.
Hi, I'm Jack from Digi Video video production company. We film and edit all your promotional videos.
Brilliant. And finally, Mr. Koss.
John Koss, Managing Director of JC Cybersecurity Services, defending, protecting and securing your business.
Okay, fantastic. And something I did forget to do there is to put the QR code up. So if you do want to get your phones out, because I know as we hand over to Nigel in a second, he'll be asking you to get your phones out in a second anyway. So if you want to get your phones out, scan the QR code. For those who've not downloaded the app yet, download the BSO app, create yourselves a login, which we can help you with if need be, and add your stamp. So Charlotte, with you adding this one on tonight, does that make your 20?
No, I've had 20. It needs resetting. I've just written this on a post-it note because I can't add any more.
Okay, no problem at all. Okay, we'll have to figure out how to do that then. So it's Daryl, if you can tell me later how we can do that, that'd be great. So you design the app.
Yeah, you have to give Charlotte the £100,000 first, though.
Sorry, that could.
I'm okay with that.
Just to redeem the loyalty.
If it was lira, I wouldn't have minded too much, but it's a case of pounds we might not be able to do. So, okay, so while you're just quickly downloading that, I'm going to introduce Nigel, tonight's speaker. I'm sure most of you actually met Nigel by now. A few people may not have done, but Nigel's one of our relatively new members. He was the last new member of 2020. Came in with a bang, really engaged well with members, and very much part of the family. So when we were talking about various activities. There's also basically went to a couple of events he was running, and we was talking about profiling, which is great. And basically said, would you mind if I do a talk on profiling? Because let's face it, it is important that we all understand different character traits, etc. So why not? So we're going to hand straight over to Nigel there, and basically let him do what he wants to do. Just quickly, has everybody now downloaded the QR code? Well, not downloaded it, scanned it. Okay, brilliant. In that case, I can come off that and I can then use my phone. So, Nigel, over to you.
Thanks, Brett, and thanks for inviting me here this evening. I'm not too sure about being the best presentation of 2021, but certainly the best BSO presentation of the 16th of February. I'm just going to start to share my screen with you all now. So I just want to introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Nigel Smith. I'm actually a project management coach. I haven't always been a project management coach. I started my early career as a project manager at the Rover Group at Longbridge until its untimely demise. Now, I was actually an accidental project manager back in the day, which meant I just sort of fell into the job and didn't really know what I was actually doing. I think today it's called Imposter Syndrome, but for me, that condition wasn't available back in the 90s. So it was just accidental at that point. And I knew it was accidental because I used to park ambulances all through my projects just to pick up all the casualties along the way. And what that really taught me, certainly working at Rover, very hard-edged, task-focused organisation full of blame culture and fear culture, that the way of getting stuff done was actually really against sort of my principles in a way, although I was often told I was doing a really great job. So I wrestled through my career with, am I actually doing the right sort of thing or actually doing the right approach? So I actually got really interested in learning more about myself and how I relate to other people to try and get a better result. Hence why I became a coach and started to understand the differences between the various styles and how communication issues are forged and how conflicts arises. What I want to take you all through this evening in the next 45 minutes or so is just a real snapshot of your own profile. And I'm going to use extreme cases just to bring everything to light. And the takeaway for all of you tonight, for one lucky winner, I'm actually going to offer you a full DISC profile. But for anybody else that's got their mini profile that you filled out on the spreadsheet, I'm more than happy to spend 20 or 30 minutes just talking through that with you at a separate point if you need to understand it more. Now, I just want to move on to some housekeeping items for this evening. So I asked you earlier if you could get your phones, your tablets, your iPads, or even a separate web browser out. If you could head over to menti.com, that's menti.com, and enter the code 3857127. That's 3857127. Okay, so tonight's presentation is going to be hugely interactive. We're going to get input from you on the floor, and we're going to see it live on the screen to help bring it to life a little bit. In terms of Q&A, more than happy to take questions. I'd rather do it at the end if we have time, so I don't interrupt the flow of the time available that I've got. And Brett, if you could just take charge of whatever's coming through chat, would appreciate that. All of the video and slideware will be available. I know Brett is recording this, but equally, the neat thing about using Menti is that all of your inputs will be saved into the slide deck, and I'll be able to send you all PDF copy of everything that's come in tonight. So all of the stuff that you put in, all the graphs that we draw and everything else, you'll get as a neat takeaway from all of this. And if you haven't found it already, in the bottom right hand corner of the screen, there's a bunch of emojis. Not really sure what they're all for, but you can play with those and just press all the buttons and everything else. You can even write little comments which will pop up on the bottom of the screen as well. So if something takes your fancy or something is of real interest to you, just knock yourself out with those small emojis. But what I'd like to do first and foremost, if everyone's got their phone fired up, could you please just enter an answer to this particular question? I just really want to gauge who knows about DISC profiling, who's had a DISC profile, or maybe you've never heard of it and don't really understand what profiling is all about. So I can tell we've had 4 in so far. Oh, the other thing I forgot to mention is you can actually enter questions in on Mentimeter as well. And if you want to do that, they'll actually come at the bottom of the screen there. And when I get to the slide at the end, they'll pop up. So you can put them in there as well as the chat on Zoom as well. So we've got 12 in. So some of you actually use DISC quite often. You've had a DISC profile done quite recently. Most people, by the sound of it, have heard of it. There's only a small percentage of people who haven't. Okay, so that means that a lot of you are pretty familiar with what it's all about, which might make the next question a little bit easier. But before I get there, I just want to talk about the Excel spreadsheet that I sent out to you all. If you had a chance to fill it out, that's great. What I'm looking for is the high-level identifier on tab 3, which is the graph. We'll come to that in just one moment. So what we're going to cover this evening is your individual DISC profile at a very high level. And I'm going to talk about the traits, the characteristics, the styles, and the preferences that typically would suggest how you behave in certain situations and how you come across to other people. Then I'm also going to go a little bit of a deeper dive into the extreme ends of DISC profiles and bring out some famous characters so that you can sort of associate each end of those. And we're looking at specific things in terms of, the greatest strengths and the fears and the fuels, and also their value to an organization or business. Then at the end, I always like to do a bit of reflective practice in terms of what you've learned through the session, what you might stop doing, what you might start doing, continue doing, or maybe even doing differently, just to see what you can take away from the session today. And as I mentioned, we will be having a bit of a quiz as well, and I'd like as many of you as possible to join in with that. So first and foremost, what I'd like to start with is what I consider to be a pretty golden rule, really. I certainly lived all my life with this particular rule. Treat others how you want to be treated. Okay, and what I want to do now, again through Menti, is just see, do you agree with that statement or not? Treat others how you want to be treated. So we've got about half, nearly all the people coming in. Okay, just waiting for a couple more. Okay, thanks everyone. So I'm going to cut it there. So classic, it's almost like this has been set up, the old Pareto analysis, the 80-20 rule. So 80% of people agree with the statement, treat others how you want to be treated. And frankly, I've got a tough ask for the rest of this presentation because I actually agree with the 20% on this one. And I'm going to spend the next half an hour explaining why that's the case. So what I want to do is to convince all of you that actually you're much better off treating others how they want to be treated. Okay. Now, you might ask yourself, well, why do we need profiling then? Well, part of the reason is we don't actually walk around with labels on our head, you know, saying I'm this, that, or whatever else. And we need something to help us understand why people act or react and respond in certain ways, many of which may be the opposite to what you actually do. But once you start to understand DISC, you'll soon come to realize in most cases, people are predictably different. And actually, if we did go around treating people the way we want to be treated, frankly, the world would be a pretty boring place. Can you imagine it, Brett? A world full of you.
You really
imagine that? Can you imagine what a nightmare that would be?
I think it'd be wonderful, Nigel. I think it'd be wonderful.
Okay. But what I'm trying to get to is you can actually use this to help build, maintain, and enjoy better relationships moving forward. And the key takeaways that I want you to have from today, apart from the statement about treating people the way they want to be treated, not a world of Brett, is raise your own self-awareness about yourself, awareness of other styles of people around you. And what I'm also going to do as well is leave you with some tips and strategies to modify, to manage, to flex your communication skills. And I call this being like a communication chameleon. And I'll go on to explain what I mean about all of that as we go through. I think I've gone too, no. Well, before I go on to what DISC is, I do need to issue a bit of a health warning on this. My slides might be out of sequence here. But what we're going to go through is not a test. I'm not trying to put anybody in a box. It doesn't define you. Everybody is as unique as their fingerprint. In fact, all of the profiles people sent me today, none of them are the same. There are millions of different combinations. Okay, so we are unique, and no one style is worse or better than any other. And in fact, the 4 styles that I will actually outline to you, every single one of us is capable of doing any of the 4 roles. It's just that some are more difficult and less natural than others. Okay. So first and foremost then, I just want to talk through the 4 styles. So typically, if you're a D, you're an extrovert. If you're an I, you're an extrovert. If you're an S, you're an introvert. C is introvert. And what I'm referring to here is on your graph is your highest marker. Okay. Now, if you've got 2 very close together, choose the highest one, or if you've got 2 the same, just choose either one of them. For this exercise, it won't really matter. The rest of it does come into play, and I'll talk about how that pans out later on. But typically, we're talking about introversion, extroversion, task, and people focus. So the I and the S are on the people or the relationship focus. The D's and the C's are on the task focus. Okay, so we're going to go on, I think, next to the next slide, which is all about what is your dominant DISC style. So for those of you that got your spreadsheet in front of you, just enter the D, I, S or C. For those of you that hadn't had an opportunity to fill out the spreadsheet, if you consider yourself to be an extrovert, you're going to either be a D or an I. So the next question to ask then is, do you prefer the task or do you prefer the people? If you're an extrovert people person, you're going to be an I. An extrovert task person, you're going to be a D. Same question for the introverted types. If you're a introverted people person, you're going to be an S. And for an introverted task person, you're going to be a C. Okay, so looking down, we've got most of those in now. So pretty much we've got 43% I's. Okay, so hopefully this is starting to mean something for you. But now what I want to do is try and bring it to life a little bit more. And the slides were out of order. So let's talk about the 4 styles generally before I dive into a little bit more detail. So D's then, D's are the commanders, okay? The JFDI guys, just do it, okay? Very outgoing, very task focused, very fast. They prefer to cut to the chase, get to the point and just get things done very, very quickly. Success for them is just about getting results. And in relationships, the people element can actually fall by the wayside at the expense of things getting moving. Moving across to the I's, these guys are the cheerleaders because they're outgoing and people focused. But at the expense of being people focused and outgoing and wanting fun and enjoyment, they can, like magpies, get easily distracted and very often are overly optimistic. Both D's and I's are glass half full people. And in relationships, you know, that task element for an I can often fall to the wayside just at the expense of having a bit of fun. And I's are absolutely brilliant at starting lots of things and finishing none of them. Okay, so now you might start to relate to certain people around you, maybe within the BSO as well, where some of these traits start to come to life a little bit more. Next, we move just below the line to S's. These are the carers, okay? So for an S, introversions generally, and C's are the same, pace is a little bit slower. S's, for example, on the people side, don't necessarily feel the need to be the centre of attention. They often seek support of others to provide stability. And very often, S's might not say what's on their mind. And that can be very frustrating, particularly for the I's and the D's, the extroverts that want to move quite fast. S's are the best people to avoid conflict and try and get to a win-win situation. And when an S is being attacked or feels very vulnerable, do not sort of mistake their kindness for a weakness. S's, by far and away, are the most stubborn of the 4 types. And then we come across to C's. Now, C's are the task-focused introverts, okay? So librarians, researchers, academics, those type of people. And because they are so task-focused, they can often be quite reserved, come across as a little bit clinical, aloof. You know, as far as people are concerned, it's more about getting the job done at the detail level. The pace is really quite slow. Great at reflection, and they make every effort to make sure that what they do is absolutely correct. These are the quality control within your organisation. But equally, C's can get very frustrated if other people do not match their expectations. And as with most things in life which are a bit yin-yang, C's and I's, D's and S's, the polar opposites, that's where you tend to get the most conflict. And I'll talk about some of those examples a little later on. So just to summarise on that, D's and the I's, extroverts, fast pace, more extroversion. C's and S's, more reflective and more detail orientated. D's and C's on the task side, much more hard focus. I's and S's, all about the softer aspects of people. And when I relate this back to my experience of working at Rover, where it was really task focused, and today now as I'm a coach, I sort of put the mantra out of soft skills for hard outcomes, because I think the people bit is really important, and then the task can follow. And that's how I work my world today. But what I'd like to do at this particular point is go into a little bit more detail. So we're going to take the D's first, okay? So D's, they're all about drive, they're all about delegation, they're about being decisive, they're about being demanding. They are the doers, they are the disruptors. They're incredibly competitive. They're into the headlines and not the storylines. It's come to me with a problem, come to me with a solution, not a problem. So again, you might in your mind start to think of people around you or from, you know, previous careers or relationships where that may be the point. Now, deep breaths, D's, because you're not really going to like this. And I know there's some D's on the call tonight. But frankly, if I take the extreme end of a D, we've got this guy. Okay. D for Donald, right. So D's characterized really by ready, fire, aim. Okay. I'm sure we can see that in this particular character. Now, other real world examples would include people like Margaret Thatcher, Sylvester Stallone, De Niro and Tom Cruise, all pretty much alpha males, even Thatcher, I guess, as well. And they're pretty uncompromising in what they want, and they definitely know how to get it. Now, of course, they're also change agents, but they can also be secret agents. Okay, so this is more like it now. So I can feel the D's out there starting to feel a little bit more smug about this. But you might be asking yourself, well, you wouldn't put Trump and Bond in the same camp, but actually they're very, very similar. So what makes Bond a D? Well, for a start, he's really impetuous, courageous. He's not easily distracted. He excels in emergencies. He's a very rash decision maker. Work is everything, and Bond is pretty unlikely to apologise for anything. So if you take all of those things and lay them on Trump, I actually think it's a 1-for-1 match there. But in saying all that, what is it that fuels a D? Well, it's all about competition. It's about outcomes. It's about outputs. It's about results. That's what gets them to the party. That's what gets their energy going. But take it to another extent, what are their biggest fears? And we've probably seen this recently from the US presidential election, the fear of failure. Okay, so all the way through the election, Trump was maintaining he was winning because he didn't want that fear of failure. And certainly the fear of being taken advantage of is just a complete no-no to a D. That's what they really, really fear. Okay. And then we look at, you know, the bits around their method of control. So the method of control is all around their ego in a way. It's their force of character. Mentioned already that they are change agents. But what, for example, is their biggest value to an organisation? Because all organisations need Ds as they need Is, S's and C's. And I'll join all this together as I come to the conclusion. But the real main thing you get from a D, it's all about the bottom line, okay? They're going to get you moving. These guys are the visionaries. They're going to set the true north and get everyone moving towards it. And they've got that courageous exterior, which bolsters and gives people confidence. Typical type of style, I would suggest, is more command and control. I personally feel it's a little outmoded, you know, outside of wartime, for example, but it's really all about getting the job done. Okay, so that's your D's in detail. And what I'd like to do now is actually move on to a bit of a quiz. So we've got about half a dozen questions or so this evening. There is a prize, and the prize is a full disc profile, and then I'll explain exactly what that is as we go through. So we've got a few questions here. If you want to put your true name in, that's absolutely fine. You'll get an alias. If not, just let me know if you're the winner, who you are, so I can identify you. And it's not just a case of getting the question right, it's also getting it right in the shortest possible time. So let's go. So what is a D-style fear? Just covered this, so it should be relatively easy. Exactly. Actually, 2 correct answers on that. I thought I'd make it easy to start with. So yeah, it is the fear of failure. So very often you can see Ds being quite animated, quite loud at times when things aren't going well for them. So let's move on to the, let's see who did pretty well on this one then. So I think, Charlotte, you were quickest, I think. Yeah, okay, so Charlotte's leading the pack now, so that's pretty good. Heartbreak is in at number 2. Brett, you can't actually take part because you know all the answers. So you're going to have to get a few wrong as we go through. So that's looking pretty good. Thank you for that. So let's now take a look at eyes then. So eyes, frankly, it's all about you, and don't we know it? The glass is always half full, and for the most part, they have a really cheery disposition. Okay, very, very positive, very often always smiling. So what is it about eyes? Well, eyes, they're inspiring, they're inspirational, they're impulsive, they're highly interactive, and allegedly interesting as well. So they can be imaginative and impressionable, but they can be irksome and irritating as well. Okay, so you've got this sort of really extravagant, person that talks a lot, particularly with an eye. It's very difficult to get a word in a conversation with an eye because they like the sound of their own voice. And eyes typically get all of their energy from people. And as I mentioned before, they like fun and enjoyment. They do get easily distracted, meaning they're the one sort that will typically procrastinate more than any other. And changing their mind is commonplace, okay? And as I mentioned before, they'll start lots of different things, but typically finish none. So I don't know whether that sounds familiar or not to anyone out there, but here's a typical example, okay? So Will Smith, the American actor, okay? Now, closer to home, if you're familiar with Graham Norton, the talk show host and radio presenter, very often on his TV shows, when he's interviewing his A-list celebrities, it's more about him than it is about his guests. Okay, so it's all about him, in that sense. And if I just take a sort of fictional example, we had James Bond before, Austin Powers. Okay, so, it's the sort of polar opposite from a sort of perspective of being really focused and demanding to someone that's really just people orientated. And the thing about these guys typically is they're very positive, very optimistic, charming, but a little bit undisciplined at the same time. And as we'll see when we get to the introvert spectrum, this can actually make the C's and the S's feel these guys aren't taking things that seriously. Okay, so as we did with the D's, what is it about the I's that really fuels them? Where do they get their energy from? And it's all about popularity and having fun. It's all about the big picture, seeing creativity and moving at a really fast pace. But with that in mind, the real things that high I's really fear, okay, are rejection. Okay, so again, in the world of showbiz and entertainment, a lot of people that actually can't deal with the loss of fame, they can't deal with that, that rejection because they're no longer in the limelight. they can get quite depressed with those type of things. So these are just things to be aware of if you're working with people in these arenas, because as I mentioned at the start, treat people the way they want to be treated. So if you want to get something out of somebody else, treat them in the style of popularity, fun. Don't focus on the rejection or the loss of popularity for them, because you're not necessarily going to get what you need. Then, of course, for I's, their method of control. Well, the I's are the secret persuaders in an organization. They're the great influencers. They've probably read all of Robert Cialdini's books. These guys are the guys that can make things happen. These are the change agents in an organization. These are the guys that will make sure stuff gets done. Okay, because they've got that positive disposition, everything's possible, and they've got that extrovert capability to bring people on board. Really, really great skill. And then what is it they bring to the organization? Well, it's that bubbly enthusiasm and really positive mindset. There's always an answer. There's always a solution to the various problems. So, great people to have around, people that light up dressing rooms for football teams and get, people sort of energized and to play better and more. These are the sort of guys that you need. So again, just on to question number 2 now, then, if you can just give you a second, if your phone's locked, I'm going to give you every opportunity to answer this one. So what can an I style sometimes be limited by? Remembering they're all about fun, moving fast, little indecisive. Okay. Now, the best answer here is about being impulsive. It's back to that magpie metaphor, where they're sort of distracted from one thing to another. So whatever pops up next is the thing they want to go for. I mean, just to give, I think I've told most people, I had an English Springer Spaniel puppy just before Christmas. He's definitely an I, because I'll take him out into the garden for him to do his toileting, and he'll see a leaf or a twig and he's off somewhere else, So I think it all applies in the animal kingdom as well. But thanks for everyone who answered that. And let's just see how that board has changed. So we've got Heartbreaker that has got that in the fastest time. Might be challenge on here, Charlotte. And there is, because you've moved down into third. Well done, Val. Moved up to top place. Brett, you've still got to do your worst here, my friend, because you can't end up in the top 3. You can't do that. That's just not on at all. So moving on then. I want to move just below the line now. So what we've covered with the D's and the I's are the extrovert tendencies on both task and people focus. What I want to do now is slow it down a bit and talk about the S's. Okay, so the S's are all about being a bit more reserved, but with a people focus. So fundamentally, S's are all about safety and security. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of people like that. So classic Diana. Okay, you could have people like Mandela or Mother Teresa, Gandhi, or even David Beckham, to be fair. And they're all about harmony. They're really supportive, loyal, and they're really good team players. They're very steady, and they will avoid conflicts and remain balanced. And again, when you start to put the juxtaposition with D's, so the polar opposite, you can start to see why some conflict starts out, because very often D's want things done right here, right now. The S's actually want to take their time. So when you think about doing change programs in your organization, I mentioned that the I's are the guys that can rally the troops and get people around and say, you can do this. The S's are the ones that will make it happen, but they're so resistant to change that actually you'll need to give them time to come to terms with what that change actually needs to be. Okay, so these are the guys that want safety, they want security. S's are also very sensitive, slow-paced and patient. And of all the 4 styles, it was really interesting because I've seen, I think a couple of people said there were coaches on the call this evening. Coaches need great listening skills, and S's are the best listeners of all 4 types. But they can also exhibit a tendency to be a little bit self-sacrificing as well, put other people's needs ahead of their own. Okay, and just to give you an example from the world of film and TV. So Marge Simpson. Okay, I don't know if any of you guys have watched Simpsons over the years. She never seems to get that older to me, but again, tries to create harmony within all of that family environment. But there is one thing to mention about S's. They can also exhibit passive aggressive tendencies. Okay, so they can be incredibly stubborn. Okay, and not only will these guys shut down under extreme pressure, but they're more likely than I's to be more of a drama queen come the time, and are prone to having complete meltdowns purely because they can't find a way to vent their anger in any other way. As I mentioned with I's before, you can't get a word in because they're talking so often. With a high S, you can't get a word out. So again, when you recognize you're working with someone that's a very high S, you need to adapt your approach and almost mirror their style so that you make them feel comfortable. So again, as with the other types, what is it that's the secret fuel for S's? Well, as I mentioned, it's all about security and it's all about harmony. If they think they're going to be threatened, they're just going to close ranks and shut up and actually probably work to rule, and possibly even slower than normal. And of course, their greatest fears is anything that threatens harmony and security. So it's loss of that security or change. As I said, these are the people that you actually need to convince more than any of the other 3 types. In terms of their method of control, these are the people that slow stuff down, but incredibly, they can be reliable. They will get the job done. Okay, and organizationally, these people make incredibly great diplomats. Okay, because they've got the essence of the great people skill. Okay, they're very sensitive to other people's needs and desires, and therefore they won't upset the apple cart. They'll always try and seek a win-win. And in an organization, they actually make the best team players. So I think now we're just going to head off to a question about S's, question 3 of 6. So let's see what this one is. Okay, so what do S's need other people to do for them? What do we think? Interesting. Okay, so fundamentally, S's really, because they're not very great at verbalizing, they won't step out and state the unpopular decisions. They'll expect other people to do it for them, typically somebody like a D. And equally, they'll want other people to prioritize work for them, because let's not forget, these are people-focused individuals. They're not task-focused, so they don't always see the need for the to-do part of the task. Great, thanks for that. And I think we might have another leaderboard here to see what's going on. So let's see what's happening. Oh, it's going to be close, I think. It's going to be very close. You're just there, Val, by a few points. There's just a thin slither there between first and second place. Brett, you've still got to do your worst here, because you need to get these wrong. You've seen all these before, I'm sure. So anyway, let's just crack on. And the final set of people I just want to cover clearly are the C's. Now, for the C's, we're talking about introversion on the task focus. Okay, so reserved and task focus. So for C's, it's all about accuracy. They're both the quality control and the quality assurance of your project and business, and they'll make sure it's done properly. They're your spell checkers. They're your grammarians. These irritating people that will say, that's really great, but you should put a comma here. Okay, I'm sure you've come across people like that. And for a C, doing things right and being efficient is the order of the day. So because they're a C, they're cautious, they're competent, they're consistent, and they are compliant. Now, C's will often go by the book, but they will also suffer from paralysis from analysis. They love data, and because they're more introverted, they'll reflect on it and they'll put more time into it than is absolutely necessary. So they are prone to a bit of overwhelm, which leads to inertia, which leads to their slow state. And actually, what I would say is that if you are a C, you're in some really great company, because there's people like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Stephen Hawking, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and even Einstein. These are guys that are almost on the perfectionist scale in terms of what they do, creative geniuses. And equally, from the world of entertainment, what about this guy, Sherlock Holmes? Now, if you remember what I said at the start, some of these guys are a bit aloof, they're a bit cold, they're a bit reserved, a bit non-approachable. So you start to see some of these personality traits in some of these characters. But they are all very organised, detail-orientated and analytical. So again, what is it that fuels a C? So a high C, it is all about accuracy and quality. They are, if you like, your audit or your police force for your organisation. They'll make sure things are done right. And it's all about quality and precision as well. And in fact, there is no such thing as perfection, but try telling that to a C. I myself am a recovering perfectionist, and I understand that it just takes too much time. The difference between good and great is not a lot, but the time taken to try and close that gap is absolutely massive. And then the greatest fears of a C, well, if you're going to criticize a C, you need to come with evidence and to back it up. Now, of course, when you start talking with D's and I's, they haven't got time for detail, so they're not going to come back with the 10 things they got wrong, which is what really irritates a C, because they might get told that that's not good enough, and they're going to want to know chapter and verse why that's not good enough. And when they get that evidence, they may or may not agree with it, but they'll thank you for giving you that level of detail. And just to really emphasize a conflict situation here, you've got your D styles, both on the task side with a C. So a D, if you remember, is ready, fire, aim. They're shooting all over the place. Now, a D will say, do it now. A C will say, well, what do you mean, do it now? And the D will say, well, as soon as possible. And a C will say, well, as soon as possible to me is a week on Tuesday, but it might be this afternoon to a D. Then the D will think he's taking the mick a little bit. And the D will say, just do it. The C will say, do it right. And the D will say, do it again. And I certainly have had those types of conversations in my career. And I start to understand where these sort of friction points tend to come from. And the biggest fear, again, of a C is all around conflict. Again, be more on the introverted side. They're not very vocal. They're not going to actually stand out and say things. They'll bottle it in a little bit like an S. So again, if you're a high D or a high I, just remember that C's will not, they'll actually fear conflict. And sometimes you may want to actually bring it out, because I's to I's and D's to D's, they'll talk about conflict all day. That's absolutely fine. But sometimes you need to move closer to that other person to understand what's going on in their world. And then really about their method of control in an organization, it's really about following the rules. So it wouldn't surprise you to know that, a lot of these people will work, probably for the civil service or the military or areas like that, where there's a real strict code of conduct and set of rules that can be applied. But they are incredibly conscientious. As I mentioned before, they're really focused on quality and detail. They'll make sure the job is done correctly. Okay, and you do need that in an organization. And then really, their true value is, as I say, they will do things right, and it is about the detail. And just to put the circle across these 4 types with the D, I, S to C, typically speaking, your Ds will set the true north compass direction of where your business is going. The I's are the guys that will get people rallied up to say, whoa, we can do this, we can get moving. The S's are the people that actually get the work done, excuse me. And the C's are the people that make sure the work is done correctly. So actually, diversity in the workplace and organisation is highly desirable. Goes back to, if it was just a world of all the same people, you wouldn't get anything done. An organisation full of D's or I's, S's or C's would not be effective. You do need all 4 styles. So I just want to come on to the next quiz question, which not surprisingly is going to cover the C element. So what is it a C style prioritises, do you think? Is it support, challenge, accuracy, or action? Excellent, excellent. So yeah, taking action is more of a D style preference, and so is accepting the challenge. Giving support is probably more of an S style. So well done to everyone who got that correct. Now, as I mentioned at the start, I mean, everyone that filled the graphs in, you've got markers all over the place, and you've got, if you're a high D, you've got I, S, and C floating around as well. And what I just want to make the point here is that, we are all a mix. And, if we've got a high D, but with a high I, actually that can start to bring down some of the effects of your D to make you more personable in those type of situations. It's a little bit like on the screen there, where you take a black coffee, but you add sugar and milk, and the coffee is nicer to taste. We're all a blend of these things. You don't necessarily go to the extremes that I've talked about here this evening. And of course, and I will come on to mention this, your profile will change under certain circumstances. So the one we've really been focusing on tonight, your profile, is really based around your work situation. There is a profile you can create for your home situation. There's also one that you can look at under stress and pressure conditions. And I'll give you an example of that, a real live example of that actually in just a moment. So really then, the things to watch out for. So I've touched on some of the conflict areas. And, as I said before, the biggest variation is where you really get the polar opposites, the D's and the S's, the fast-paced, task-focused extroverts taking on, the shy, reserved people type focus. And and it also works with I's and C's. And some of you actually will have in your profile on your graph, your 2 highest one might be an I and a C. And what you might find is you get some internal conflict yourself about wanting to have a bit of fun, enjoyment, and all the rest of it. But actually, there's something you really need to do and carry on. And the highest one of those will often win out, but it can sort of cause a little bit of internal conflict. But generally speaking, C's, reserved and task focused, and will sometimes view I's, the people that start loads of things and never finish it, the magpie syndrome, all fun, jokey and very talkative. They'll see them as very calculating and condescending. And, they'll also see I's as very impulsive and irritating. And very often with I's, these are the people you can't get a word in. A C might say something like, well, they'll tell this massive great story, but they'll say to the I, well, what happened in the end? Because they'll just never get there, because they just keep talking and talking and talking. And all a C really wants to do is bottom line, really, just get to the point, And these guys aren't really great at verbalizing, in extreme cases. And equally, D's will see S's as too slow and steady, and not really, it could be seen as not pulling their weight. And whereas S's will see D's as just too domineering and demanding. Very often in organizations, you'll see that these groups of people will tend to not mix or purposely avoid one another because they just don't want that confrontation. Well, certainly from the S point of view. But the one thing I would say is that, for the extrovert camp, the D's and the I's, the introvert community shouldn't be too worried about being quite blunt with a D or an S, because they're not that they're forgetful, but they don't think about it or internalize it or reflect it in quite the same way as the introvert side would be. So D's and I's tend to take things less personally. So again, it's moving towards that other style in a sense. And you've probably heard, you know, if you've got this really fearsome character, if you sort of take them on in a sense in their own game, they see that as a mark of respect as opposed to sort of cowering down. So again, it is moving towards that different character style. And very interesting, when I started this webinar this evening, we'd got a few people online, and it was really interesting to see the behaviour of the various people on the call, because it might be slightly different now in COVID time, but if we got a video or a Zoom call without the pandemic, you know, S's and C's, they would jump onto the webinar. They'd probably do it 2, 3, 4 minutes after it started. They just want to get in through the back door. They want to be camera off, on mute. Don't want to get into any sort of idle chatting with anyone else on the call. But of course, the D's and the I's, they'll be there possibly 2, 3 minutes before, you know, the airwaves are full because they're all talking to one another and interacting. And that's a situation the S's and the C's won't actually like. But, you know, you'll notice these guys on a video call, the D's and the I's, those will be the ones that will be the most vocal. And of course, in normal in-person situations where you walk into a room of people, you'll pick out your D's and your I's really, really easily, because they'll be the most animated ones. They'll be the ones talking, laughing and smiling. Your S's and your C's, typically at the extreme end, will be the guys sat in the corner, you know, maybe looking out the window or whatever else. I am actually drawing quite extremes on all of this because, of course, as I've mentioned before, in certain situations, people will modify to manage their approach, you know, in terms of how they react to certain situations. And just on S's, for example, I've said to you before that these are the guys that are the hardest to change in an organisation. So if you're a fast-moving D, and for example, on a Friday afternoon, you need to say to one of your staff, you know, under normal situations, I need you in Belgium, in Brussels on Monday. Do not tell an S on the Friday afternoon they need to be in Belgium on Monday morning. It just won't wash. But it will wash for another D, because it's like, yeah, bring it on, fast paced, let's go. S's need far more time to do that. Okay, and I think I've got one more question coming up. Yes, so question 5 or 6. I think this is for you to have a guess, possibly what you think my high level style is. And I think I've given a few clues away through the presentation today, but I'll be really interested to understand what people think my highest indicator is. Okay, well, that's really interesting on a number of levels, because actually I am that recovering perfectionist. I'm stepping away from the introvert task focused world. When I mentioned before, when I worked at Rover, very, very task orientated organization, you know, building cars. It's a little bit like sausages, really. If you realize what went into them, you just wouldn't eat them, you know. But you know, rest assured that any car you buy on the road today has been built, you know, with 30,000 components from the cheapest supplier. So that should put your mind at rest for all of that. But very interestingly, I took a conscious decision about 3 years ago to become more people focused. I talked about my soft skills for hard outcomes mantra, and I made big inroads to try and become more personable and become more I, which for me is a polar opposite, because my 2 major styles are C and S, basically on that sort of introvert spectrum. So interesting. Well done to those that got it right, and let's just see how that shapes out for the penultimate question. So Brett, good job you got that one wrong by the sound of it. So Val, doing pretty well there. You got pretty unassailable lead, but I will say that the final question probably is a bit of a leveler and will give everyone a chance to have a good go at this. And actually, it's really interesting because all the Ds on the call tonight will be the ones that want to win this. Ultra competitive. It's all about the result. So let me just get on the right screen there. Okay, and here is the deciding question. Final one. And here we go. So 5 frogs sitting on a log. 4 decide they're going to jump off. How many are left? Okay, good. Well done. A lot of people got that right. Anyone who got the answer right, just want to unmute and share for the benefit of those that didn't know that.
The reason, basically, just because 4 have jumped off, there's still 5. Just say where they're gone. There's still 5 there.
Yeah. Well, it's all about deciding to do something and actually doing something. This is a great question about action. You know, I could decide to go and do something, but unless I physically take the action to do it, I'm still left where I am. So a bit of a riddle in a sense, but let's see how that that shapes up at the end of the day for us then. Brett, I did tell you.
Yeah, so I was hoping somebody else got it right.
Okay, well, the good news is, Val, well done. Congratulations. We should really take Brett off the podium altogether, but well done, Val. I'm going to tell you what your prize is now. I think I mentioned it at the start of the evening. I'm prepared to give you the full disc profile, which goes into 2 other dimensions more than we've covered this evening, which will give you the Val at home, the Val at work, and the Val under pressure. And trust me, 99 times out of 100, they are all different styles. And I'm just going to touch on that right now, because what we've really focused on today is the public self, or the mask, okay, which is the person you are in the work situation. And that's the one that is most likely over time to change the most, purely because, of course, we change jobs and careers on a more regular basis than we change ourselves in a sort of home. Your perceived self, or your mirror view, is one that is most likely to remain the same throughout your life. And the one under stress or pressure is just how your things change over time. Now, what I will say, we've got a particularly good profile here, I have to say, because if the graphs are identical or close to identical across each of the 3 areas, then that person, not only are they doing the job that was made for them, but they actually don't have to modify to manage their approach at all. Okay, so we look at this one in front of us here. If you look at the public and the perceived self, virtually identical. In fact, in the work setting, they're a little less dominant. But look what happens to them when they're under stress or under pressure. The D goes through the roof. Okay, it's all about taking action in those certain situations. And equally, their S score goes above the line. So what does that mean? Well, the S means that they're looking for more security and harmony. So this is a profile of actually one of the people on the call tonight. So I don't know if you want to make yourself known, or anybody wants to have a guess who that might be. Do you want to tell them, Brett?
I was going to say, does somebody want to have a guess at this one? I mean, it's somebody on here. Any ideas?
Is it Brett?
So who's that?
Brett.
What?
Is it Brett?
Oh, yeah, it might well be. Yeah, it's me.
It's your profile.
Yeah. So the things here that make it Brett anyway, typically, is Brett is a very talkative, personable individual. We know from listening to him on all the various things that he does through the BSO that detail's not really his thing at the nth degree. He likes to outsource it a little bit, and I know Victoria's got a lot of that right now. So first and foremost, Brett is all about relationships, which, you know, is testament to the number of contacts and things he's got and all the rest of it. But equally, he's also got a very task-focused, get it done, get it over the line. So generally speaking, Brett is extrovert, but he's also fast-paced as well. And what these set of graphs do show is just that modification that's necessary, between the various states. Now, very often what I tend to see, certainly when I'm doing these profiles for hiring managers or recruiters, if you see a difference in the mirror graph to the mask graph, let's say, for example, the job demands a high D score, but in the perceived self, it's very, very low. You know that person is actually going to be quite stressed in, modifying that big gap to be more of a D in the work situation. Because one of the things I forgot to mention is that the high D style is the style most likely to suffer with work-life balance issues. So they tend to give more, and it's all about the result. It's all about the journey. It's all about getting stuff done and forgetting all the people side of things. So I trust that all makes sense. And this is just here a little thing that I put together to try and work out if there's any correlation between the various styles and whether people prefer Android or iPhones. So just wait for a few more of those to come in. What have we got? We've got 8. Just wait for a few more. So let's have a look. Android. Yeah, it hasn't really worked out. I mean, is this more of a question of who's right and who's wrong? No, not at all. Typically what happens, if most people who are relationally focused, more people focused, will tend to prefer Apple products because it's more about the image and what it means for them. Whereas the more practical task type individuals will prefer Android devices. But this small survey test hasn't actually proven that. And I didn't actually have a question for those of you that have got an iPhone. Is your screen broken? Because typically they are with Apple devices. But thanks for answering that. And really, just to summarise on this, I'm sorry I've gone over time a little bit. So, the commander, the cheerleader, the carer, and the critical thinker. So, the D's is the ready, fire, aim. It's just about getting the job done, moving fast. The I's are the cheerleaders, the rah, we can, you can do this. We can get everyone together. We can get it all moving. The S's are all about getting the job done, but they are the most stubborn. And these are the ones that, if you want to change initiative in your organization, these are the guys you need to convert first. And then your C's, really all about quality, policy, procedure. They're the guys that will get the job done right. And then just to summarize, what I'm trusting that's happened this evening is that not only have I raised some awareness perhaps about your own individual style, but also some of the traits and characteristics of those around you that may be a slightly different style, and some of the tools and techniques that you can use to move closer towards that particular person. And again, like I started at the beginning, really, I know it was a bit of an 80-20 in the other direction, but I firmly believe that if you treat people the way they want to be treated, you got more chance of getting a success for you, them, and whatever it is that you're actually working on together. And at the end of the day, the way you adopt your style is that perhaps you need to slow down a bit or perhaps speed up. You may need to be more detail orientated or more bigger picture focused, or it might just be a bit more attention to the detail of the task, or a bit softer on the people side. And the best way really to understand, what styles people are, clearly profiling helps, but fundamentally, and the coaches on the call will know this, is just ask questions, and you can start to see with maybe a bit of body language or what they tell you in response, the sort of things they're interested in, what they're looking for, the nature in the way they speak, how loud they are, and you can sort of get a bit of a picture for which of the 4 styles might be their most dominant one. And then, of course, it's entirely up to you, how far across that bridge you want to go to bridge that gap, as it were, in terms of working with other people. So I believe that is the final slide. But what I would like to do, and I will capture this and send it all to you afterwards, but on the basis on what you've heard over the last hour, I guess now. Apologies for going over time. And again, if you could just have a go in Menti, what is it that, on reflection, you would perhaps start to do more of or less of, or continue to do, or maybe just do differently? Just give you a couple of moments to fill that in. I think that's by a clock, isn't it? Is that you, Brett?
Yeah, we need to wrap it up if we can, mate.
Yeah, of course.
It's okay. So it's the what's it called? It's the perfectionist in you. You want to make sure everything's right. I'm going, yeah, just get it done now.
Yeah. Interestingly, D's are the worst listeners, and what I've learned in my experience is that if you're surrounded, if you're not listening to what people are saying, then very often D's will be surrounded by people with nothing to say, typically. Okay.
So as those are coming on there, obviously, thank you. Obviously, Nigel, thank you very much for presenting today. It's very difficult for people on Zoom to basically get interaction and present and do everything at the same time. So Nigel, thank you very much for obviously everything you've done on that. I think you did a fantastic job, especially as you know in my profile and obviously how I look at things. But can we have a round of applause for Nigel there for doing what I think is a great job. And I'd like to ask, does anybody have any questions on this? I'll give people my reasoning for it in a second while we've asked Nigel to do that. But do we have any questions for Nigel? No, okie dokie. So the reasoning for... Oh, sorry, who was that? Who was somebody saying yes?
I've got no idea who put that one in. I don't know what the answer is either. I think that's one for you, Brett, isn't it?
It's when are we getting a 24-pack of beer? We were promised shortly after you buy me a bottle of Cristal is the answer. So that's absolutely fine.
Okay, I can talk to that particular question. I've sort of part answered it already. That your work profile is most likely to change because you change into different environments. And I know certainly from one of the profiles I saw tonight, it seems to be one of you on the call tonight that is trying to be all things to all men. And sometimes that's because you're in a job you're not too sure about, or you've just started and you're trying to cover all four bases. But your basic home one is your Indigenous one is very unlikely to change. It's a little bit like Myers-Briggs. It's a little bit like SDI. They tend to be quite fixed, but they can change. What I would say is significant life changes, losses or made redundant or losing a family member or something else pretty serious, maybe a major illness can shift your markers on all of these. So definitely for that one, yeah. And okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sorry, Nigel, I forgot you had that part of it. I've got to be honest. It's
no,
I do apologise.
No, you're welcome.
So it's so the reasoning behind Nigel's presentation today, I've had quite a few conversations certainly since Christmas and also before about sales, basically how to drive more leads, how to drive more prospects, how to pick up more sales, and this is a big part of it. It's a case of actually understanding the people you're dealing with and actually adopting your processes for it. And I know that Don uses this kind of thing. Obviously, I've been on a presentation with Don where he's talking about obviously profiles, etc. It's a massive part of understanding client bases. So whatever you're doing has to align with these kind of areas. Otherwise, you just won't. For instance, with Nigel's case, it's just out of curiosity, who here was a D? I can probably guess, but who was D profiles? Yeah. So okay. So in terms of that, it's a case of when we were presenting perhaps to yourselves, it's a case of so what would you like to do now? I'll do it. I'll join. Whereas with Nigel, it's a case of he needs to have a look at things first. He wants to take his time a little bit. He wants to follow up. He wants to do a bit of due diligence. If we try to go down, do you want to join now, Nigel? It'll be, oh, I'm scared.
I need more time.
Yeah. So a lot of this is exactly the same with yourselves and the way you work. So personally, I find this fascinating. I'm sure Nigel will have conversations with anybody on here who would like to obviously know more about this. And like I say, any topics you'd like us to cover, please let us know. The next month's evening is with Vicky. Vicky, you're talking about branding and creating brand and the importance of brand, etc. Is that right? Yeah. So it's. Are you still there, Vicky? Yeah. Did you want to say anything about what you're going to be covering at all, or?
I'm still deciding.
Still deciding, so that's no problem at all. Nigel, what rates that one?
Vicky, is that Vicky? I think she's an S. An S with a bit of C. Bit slow paced.
Don't tell her that. She'll have you assassinated.
It's just a guess.
Yeah. So was that right, Vicky?
I think I probably didn't concentrate when I did the disc profile, to be honest with you, because I'm the person that Nigel said was doing something for everybody, because I was almost the same across the board. So probably need to do it again. I usually have to do things twice.
Yeah, no worries. So the question is, did people enjoy that at the end of the day? Yeah. So again, I ran over a little bit on the time. It's a case of it's not a problem. I did actually send him a message saying 9 minutes left, but that was he wasn't there. So I was asked to keep an eye on the comments. But I mean, can people see the relevance of this in the workplace for all of us? Yeah. Okay.
And my offer's there, by the way, for anyone that wants to have a conversation on the profile they've done. I'm more than happy to do that, to dig into it a little deeper. And of course, with Val, our winner tonight, Val, I'll send you the details of the full profile, and we'll agree a time to go through it. I know you'll want it done pretty quick, and you want the results fast and all the rest of it. So you'll get a nice 14-page report with it as well, all in full colour. So, but you might not have a time to read it, but we'll see. But I'll talk you through it anyway.
I've got somebody to do that for me. That's okay.
Delegate it.
I mean, genuine funny thing on here. I went through this with Nigel. That's obviously produced the whole report off the back of it. And he went, "Oh yeah, he mentioned something like that." I said, "Where? I haven't seen it. Where? What? Hey, I couldn't be bothered to read the report. I just went straight to the graphs. I just wanted the pictures. Show me the pictures. Show me the pictures. That's all I wanted. I didn't even realise there's another 10 pages on it. It's a case of it was one of those. So it tells you a lot. So if there's no more questions on here at all, is there anything anybody would like? Any problems people have got? Anything people would like to ask while they're here? I mean,
could I maybe ask one more question, Brett? It's kind of because it's interesting when. So I'm going through the process at the moment of kind of identifying personas and audience, and you know, when I've been through that process before, you talk about kind of people and demographics and what roles they do, but you don't consider them potentially, you know, all having different disc profiles. And, you know, it's interesting to know, you know, to hear maybe Nigel's view or anybody else's view as to when you're doing things like digital marketing or online marketing, do you take different disc profiles into account, i.e. write some copy to appeal to the Ds and write other copy to appeal to the S's?
And just to give you a really stark example on that one, Daryl, if you were trying to sell to a bunch of Cs, like technical people, if you like, if you do your post or whatever you're going to communicate in a step-by-step fashion, that's going to resonate so much more with them than it will to any of the other 4 styles.
Yeah.
You know, and actually, if you want to reach out to me afterwards, I've got some stuff I can dig out, which is actual copy, if you like, of how to communicate to each of these 4 styles. Because you might actually you're going to target sort of business leaders and entrepreneurs. They're more likely to be your Ds and your Is. So it's all the fast moving stuff, you know. So I'll try and dig that out. And maybe what I'll do, Brett, is make it available to yourself so you can circulate. But for sure, yeah, you can communicate to different styles, because if someone doesn't understand it, it's not meant for them, but it will meet a target part of your market if you're trying to go for specific types of people. And of course, you know, with the S's and the C's and the I, well, the I's typically are salespeople, let's be frank, at the end of the day. The S's are your carers, you know, in that sense, you know, clinicians and nurses and that type of stuff, broadly speaking. And your C's are your researchers, your librarians, your analysts, those type of people, you know, and your D's are more in that leadership type category.
No, that's great, Nigel. Thank you.
I mean, Daryl, just on that one, I mean, let's face it, we obviously you created the app for us. Just imagine there when you was dealing with me, what questions I was asking. When's it going to be done by? When is it? Okay. What's the user experience? I'm caring about what the user experience is. I'm interested in that side of things. Did I really care about all the little bits that go on the back of it and I want to know how it looks. I want to know how it looks like, because if that thing's how anal did I get about making sure the background was right?
Yeah.
I want it to look right. So in other words, I want to be a James Bond, but in a really flamboyant shirt, talking a lot.
Yeah, it's made me realise though, because each of the clients, each of the people I'm trying to sell to, will all have a different graph.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to attract, you've got to, in terms of things like social media posts, you've probably just got to write them in slightly different voices. Like as Nigel, as you said, a social media post about a product that's incredibly well structured and laid out. Yeah. And then maybe another post that is for the people that will spend 2 seconds reading it. Something that hits home a little bit more. Because you're right, Brett. We deal with different people, and every client I deal with, it's a different set of questions. It's a different focus. It's a different lens they're looking through.
Absolutely. So I think it's a great point. So we've got a couple of minutes to go. I'm going to say, obviously, thank you very much for everybody attending. And once again, massive thank you for Nigel.
You're welcome.
For hosting tonight's event. Next on Thursday, I think Thursday we got our next breakfast. So I think there's 2 spaces left on there. Anybody wants to attend those, please book in. We'll be first come, first serve. For those who've not been to the breakfast before, it's a case of it's very, very simple. It's basically a small group of people together to ask that question, how can we help you, and then work together. And then next week there's a whole host again of things. I think we're back into a meet and greet, I think, next week. And just to let people know that is already busy. It's kind of, I need to expand it back out to 24 again, but I know there's already 18 people booked on that. So it's a case of if people are going to attend, it'd be advisable to book in as soon as. But my tea's done. I'm saying that I haven't actually eaten since 8 o'clock last night. I don't know about you lot, but I'm absolutely starving. It's a case of, so I'm going to kick all you lot off now, and because I need to go and eat, and Jack's going to go and do all the editing on this. So Jack, and we're looking forward to this one. I don't think there's anything contentious we need to worry about. We haven't upset anybody. We haven't slagged anybody off. We've been very mindful of everybody, but there is still about 30 seconds left, so there is still time. So if anybody, come on, Pierre, you've got to be able to insult somebody. Come on, surely you've got to be able to do it. No. I'm disappointed today. It's been very well-mannered meeting. So
the language has been really good, so let's keep it that way, shall we? Otherwise, we just cut.
Absolutely.
End.
Brilliant. So anyway, thank you very much for everybody attending. I'll see you all soon. And just to be one final thing, just be aware there's going to be a few people going to be contacted over the next few weeks. Victoria is going to start making phone calls. Just to try and make sure people are okay with everything, if there's anything they need from us, but also to make sure that basically following all the various channels, making sure they're okay with the app, making sure they're okay with the portal. But she is very nervous. So if you do get a phone call from Victoria, if you can be nice to her, because obviously, let's face it, you've seen my profile now. If I get upset, I end up being an outrageous D, which is normally met with petrol and matches. So anyway, off the back of that, thank you very much, ladies and gents. I shall see you all soon.
Cheers. Cheers, Brett. Thanks, Nigel.
See you later, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.